The CEO had been waiting for 43 minutes, but she didn't look annoyed. She looked like she'd been waiting much longer than that, like she'd been waiting 7 years. James stood in the restaurant doorway, snow melting on his shoulders, watching the woman at table 12 check her watch for the 3rd time, and something about the gesture felt rehearsed. Familiar. Wrong. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter's sitter. "Lily keeps saying a lady is watching the house. Should I be worried?" James looked back at the woman. Sarah Winters. CEO. Blind date. Stranger. Except when she finally looked up and met his eyes across the restaurant. Her smile held recognition he hadn't earned yet. She knew him. And the way her hand moved to cover the phone on her table, the screen showing a photo of a blonde girl in a red jacket, made James's blood run cold, because he'd bought that exact jacket for Lily last winter. The restaurant hummed with holiday cheer, all velvet bows and candlelight. He was 43 minutes late. The sitter had called about Lily's fever, and by the time he'd settled his daughter with medicine and her favorite blanket, the clock had become his enemy. He'd texted an apology. No response. He assumed his date had left. But she was still there. Sarah Winters sat with her hands folded on the white tablecloth, a glass of red wine untouched before her, watching the door with an expression James couldn't quite read. Not annoyance, not impatience. Something else. She smiled when she saw him, the kind of smile that reached her eyes but somehow didn't warm them. Mid-30s, dark hair swept back. Wearing a charcoal dress that spoke of wealth and power. "I'm so sorry," James started, but she waved him off. "Don't be. I knew you'd be about 45 minutes late." The words came out casual, but they landed wrong. James pulled out his chair slowly. "You knew." She took her first sip of wine. "Your friend mentioned you have a daughter. Kids get sick. Christmas Eve is the worst timing." Reasonable. Logical. Except his friend hadn't mentioned Lily. James was sure of that. The waiter appeared, and James ordered bourbon. Sarah asked about Lily with unsettling precision. How old? What grade? What school? When James mentioned Ridgemont Elementary, something flickered across her expression. "That's a good school. Strong music program. Lily plays violin, doesn't she?" James's hand tightened around his glass. "How did you know that?" Sarah's smile didn't falter. Tom must have mentioned it. But Tom didn't know about the violin. Lily had just started lessons 2 months ago. The evening proceeded with mechanical courtesy. Sarah talked about her company, a tech firm specializing in data analytics. James talked about his woodworking. But beneath the small talk, questions multiplied. When James glanced at Sarah's phone face up on the table, the lock screen showed a photo of a little girl wearing a red jacket James recognized because he'd bought one just like it for Lily last winter. Sarah quickly flipped the phone over. When the check came, Sarah insisted on paying. "I'd like to see you again," she said. James heard himself agree, though every instinct screamed caution. Outside, snow had started to fall. Sarah pulled her coat tight. "Your daughter. Lily. She's afraid of the dark, isn't she?" James felt ice spread through his veins. "What?" Sarah's expression was gentle. "Tom mentioned it, about the night light, the one shaped like a moon. But the moon night light was new. James had bought it 3 days ago. He'd told no one." Sarah touched his arm, her hand cold through his jacket. "I'll call you," she said, and walked away into the snow. James stood there long after her taillights disappeared. His phone buzzed. A text from the sitter. "Lily's fever broke. Also, random question. But did you change your internet password? Mine isn't working." He hadn't changed the password. He started walking to his truck, each step feeling heavier. All James could think about was the way Sarah had known about the nightlight. Like she'd been waiting, not just 43 minutes, but much, much longer. James drove home through streets transformed by snow. 3 years since Rachel died. 3 years of learning to be both parents, of bedtime stories and braided hair, and the constant fear that he was doing everything wrong. The blind date had been Tom's idea, pitched as a way to get back out there with someone who'd understand the single-parent thing. His daughter was awake when he got home, propped against pillows, her blonde hair dark with sweat. The moon nightlight cast silver shadows across walls covered in her drawings. "Daddy," she said, and her voice was small and scared. The knocking came back. James sat on the edge of her bed, pressing his palm to her forehead, still warm but not dangerous. "It's just the tree branch, sweetheart." "The wind is strong tonight." But even as he said it, he glanced at the window. The oak tree was 15 feet away. No branches close enough to knock. Lily grabbed his hand. It wasn't the tree. It was tapping, like someone with fingernails. Tap, tap, tap. "Did you see anything?" Lily shook her head. The curtain was closed. "But Daddy, I think it was the same lady from before, the one who was looking at our house. I could see her shadow through the curtain, and it was the same shape." James's throat went dry. "What do you mean, the same shape?" His daughter's eyes were very blue in the nightlight's glow. "Tall? With her hair up? Like a crown?" Sarah had worn her hair swept up tonight. Sarah, who knew about the nightlight. Sarah, who'd been waiting at that restaurant like she'd been waiting much longer than 43 minutes. James stayed with Lily until she fell asleep, then walked through the house, checking every window, every door. Everything was secure. But in the kitchen, something made him pause. The coffee mug beside the maker was wrong. The handle facing left instead of right. James was right-handed. He always set his mug with the handle to the right. He picked up the mug and caught the faintest trace of that scent again. Lavender and vanilla. Someone had been in his house. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I hope Lily feels better. Chicken soup helps with fevers. My mother's recipe. I'll send it to you." James read it 3 times. How did Sarah have his number? The text had arrived while he was driving home, while the sitter was still here, while Lily was crying about someone knocking at her window. He pulled up Tom's contact and typed, "Need to talk. About Sarah. Call me." The response came surprisingly fast for 2 in the morning. "Can't talk. Trust me. Give her a chance. She's been through a lot. Just trust me." James stared at the screen. Trust me. Tom had been saying that a lot lately. But people changed. People kept secrets. And trust was a commodity James had learned not to spend freely. The next morning, Christmas morning, Lily's fever was gone, but her mood remained subdued. She opened presents with mechanical politeness, her usual enthusiasm dimmed by something James couldn't quite reach. Over breakfast, she finally spoke. "Daddy, do you think Mommy sent someone to watch over us?" James set down his fork carefully. "What makes you ask that?" Lily pushed her pancakes around her plate. "I had a dream last night. After the knocking stopped, I dreamed Mommy was trying to tell me something important, about the lady, about being careful." James felt the coffee in his stomach turn acidic. "What did Mommy say? In the dream?" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said, the lady is looking for something she lost, and she thinks we have it. But we need to be careful, because the lady doesn't remember things right. She's confused about what really happened." That evening, James did what he'd been resisting all day. He Googled Sarah Winters. The search returned pages of results about her company, tech articles praising her innovative approach to data analytics. Nothing suspicious. But on the 3rd page, James found something else. A newspaper article from 3 years ago. Local CEO's son missing after hospital visit. The article was sparse on details, but it mentioned Sarah Winters and a son, age 4, who disappeared from Mercy General Hospital during a routine appointment. The case had apparently gone cold. No resolution. No closure. 3 years ago. Lily had been 4, the same age as Sarah's missing son. He clicked through to more articles, but information was scarce. Then, nothing. The story had vanished from the news cycle as thoroughly as the child had vanished from the hospital. James opened a new search. Mercy General Hospital missing. Child, 2020. One article made him stop breathing. 2 families claim same infant after hospital clerical error. The date was wrong. Not 3 years ago, but 7. 7 years ago. When Lily was born. The article described a mix-up in the hospital's maternity ward. 2 female infants born within hours of each other. Both to first-time mothers, both blonde and blue-eyed. A clerical error had temporarily switched the identification bracelets. The error was caught within 24 hours, the article said. The babies were returned to their correct parents. The hospital issued an apology. Both families declined to comment. James felt reality tilt sideways. Lily had been born at Mercy General. So had Sarah's son, according to the articles about his disappearance. 7 years ago, 2 babies might have been mixed up. 3 years ago, Sarah's 4-year-old son had disappeared. The math aligned in a way that made James's vision swim. He walked to Lily's room. She slept peacefully, her face soft with innocence. James stood in the doorway and tried to remember Rachel pregnant. Tried to remember Lily as a newborn, but memory was unreliable. Rachel had insisted they leave the hospital quickly, who'd been paranoid about germs, who'd refused to let James bring Lily back for routine follow-ups. He'd thought it was postpartum anxiety. And then Rachel had died, drowning in the lake, and James had been left alone with a 4-year-old daughter and 1,000 questions he'd never asked. His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. I know you're confused. I know this seems strange. But I need you to understand something. 3 years ago, my son was taken from me at that hospital. I've been looking for him ever since. And 2 months ago, I found him. He's been safe. He's been loved. But he's mine, James. And we both know it. James's knees went weak. He gripped the doorframe, reading the text again and again. We both know it. But he didn't know anything except that someone was suggesting the impossible, that Lily, his daughter, his entire world, might be someone else's missing child. That Rachel might have known, that Rachel might have taken a child that wasn't hers. Another text appeared. Don't call the police. Please. Let's just talk. Let me explain. There's so much you don't know about your wife, about what happened that day at the hospital, about why she was so afraid. I'm not trying to take Lily from you. I'm trying to give you the truth. James typed back. Where do you want to meet? The response was immediate. Mercy General Hospital. Tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. The maternity ward. I'll show you everything. James didn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table with Rachel's old laptop, the one he'd kept charged, but rarely opened. Now he opened the laptop with hands that only shook slightly. The password was Lily's birthday. Inside, folders organized with Rachel's characteristic precision. He started with personal, clicking through documents that tracked the mundane details of their shared life. Then he found it. A half-finished novel Rachel had been writing about a woman who wakes up in someone else's life. James had never read it. Now he opened the file and scrolled through pages. The protagonist was named Miranda. She'd taken something that wasn't hers because the universe had made a mistake, and she was simply correcting it. She'd been the better mother, the more deserving one, and sometimes justice required breaking laws. James read faster, his eyes burning. In the novel, Miranda's husband never knew. Miranda's daughter grew up happy and loved, and none of it was a lie because love made it true. The novel ended mid-sentence, abandoned on the same page where Miranda's husband started asking questions she couldn't answer. Rachel had stopped writing 2 weeks before she died. James closed the laptop and pressed his palms against his eyes. Fiction wasn't fact, but Rachel had been terrified of hospitals. Rachel had been paranoid about anyone taking Lily. Rachel had insisted they homeschool for the first 2 years. And Rachel had drowned in a lake she'd been kayaking on for years, on a morning with perfect weather. The police had ruled it an accident. No signs of struggle, no suicide note. Just a tragic drowning. Unless there was a reason. Unless Rachel had been living with guilt that finally became unbearable. Unless she'd looked at Lily one morning and seen someone else's stolen child and couldn't carry that weight anymore. James stood up and walked to the bathroom. He stared at his reflection. Brown hair, green eyes, square jaw. Lily looked nothing like him. She'd always looked like Rachel. Everyone said so. But Rachel's coloring had been darker, her features sharper. Lily was all soft edges, and golden hair, and blue eyes that came from neither of her parents. At 9 a.m., he was in his truck, driving toward Mercy General Hospital. By 9:30, he parked in the visitor lot. Sarah's text directed him to the 3rd floor, maternity records room. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and artificial heat. James took the elevator to the 3rd floor, following signs that led him deeper into the administrative wing, until he found the records room at the end of a hallway. Sarah was waiting. She wore jeans and a sweater today, her hair down, looking younger and more vulnerable. The control was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. She stood up when she saw him, holding a manila folder thick with documents. "Thank you for coming," she said, and her voice cracked. "I know how this must seem. But you need to understand what happened. You need to see the proof." Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands. 7 years ago, I gave birth to a son at this hospital. October 14th, 2:17 p.m. A healthy baby boy. The nurses took him for routine checks. When they brought him back, something felt wrong. She pulled out a photograph, a newborn in a hospital blanket. "This is my son. Noah. Look at him. Really look." James stepped closer. The baby in the photograph was generic, the way all newborns were. But there was something. A birthmark on the left shoulder, star-shaped. "Lily has a birthmark," James heard himself say. "Right shoulder, star-shaped." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "No, left shoulder. I would know. A mother knows her own child." She pulled out more documents, hospital records, birth certificates, pages of handwritten notes in Rachel's precise script. "Your wife knew too. She must have. Because 2 weeks after birth, she tried to access my son's medical records. The hospital flagged it as suspicious. Rachel claimed it was a clerical error. But look at the dates. She kept trying, 6 different times. She tried to access Noah's records. She was checking something, comparing something." James's hands were numb. "Where did you get these records?" "These are confidential." Sarah's smile was bitter. "I'm a data analyst. I specialize in finding information people want hidden. It took me 3 years, but I reconstructed everything. The hospital covered it up. They paid off both families, made us sign NDAs. But I never signed. I refused. I told them my son was missing, and they told me I was delusional." She pulled out hospital admission forms from 7 years ago, showing 2 births within 3 hours of each other. Baby girl Hartley, born at 11:42 a.m. Baby boy Winters, born at 2:17 p.m. Both healthy. Both blonde. Sarah's finger traced the routing numbers on the infant identification bracelets. Someone had typed 4782 instead of 4872. A simple mistake, except this mistake meant 2 babies wearing nearly identical bracelets, 2 lives that might have been switched. Rachel noticed, Sarah said, pulling out a photocopy of a complaint form. Rachel's handwriting detailing concerns about the baby's appearance. The hospital's response suggested postpartum depression. They dismissed her, but Rachel kept pushing. More documents, medical records requests, denied. Denied. Then a gap of 3 months, followed by a single approved request, heavily redacted. She got proof. I think she confirmed that the babies were switched, and I think that's when she made a choice. The choice being to do nothing, to keep the baby she'd been raising. James understood that choice in a way that terrified him. You said your son disappeared 3 years ago, James said slowly. But if Rachel kept Lily, then your son would have been with you all along. He would have been my biological son. Sarah's face crumpled. I know. I couldn't keep him. I tried. But he wasn't mine, and I knew it, and that knowledge poisoned everything. She pulled out photographs, a progression of a young boy. James studied each image. Maybe. Maybe not. The boy had brown hair, darker than Lily's gold. His name was Noah, and he was afraid of water. Terrified. Like he remembered something. James's blood went cold. Rachel drowned. Sarah met his eyes. I know. Rachel was an experienced kayaker. The weather was perfect. But she left no note, no explanation. It wasn't a question now. Sarah's theory was becoming clear. I think she lived with impossible knowledge for 3 years. I think eventually that contradiction destroyed her, or someone destroyed her, to keep the secret safe. Where is he now? James asked. Noah, the boy you raised. Where is he? Sarah's hands trembled. 3 years ago, I brought him to this hospital for a checkup. He was 4 years old. I'd been documenting everything, building a case. I was days away from filing a lawsuit that would have exposed everything. And then Noah disappeared. I left him in the exam room for 2 minutes while I spoke with the doctor. When I came back, he was gone. The hospital said he'd never been there, that their records showed no appointment. The police investigated. They found nothing. They suggested I was mentally ill, that I'd invented him out of grief. They almost had me committed. She looked at James with eyes that held 3 years of sleepless nights. But I have medical records proving Noah existed. I have photographs, school enrollment forms. He was real, and someone took him to shut me up. James walked to the window. Let me understand your theory. You think the hospital mixed up our babies 7 years ago. You think Rachel discovered this, but decided to keep Lily anyway. You think someone kidnapped your son to prevent the truth from coming out. Sarah joined him. I know it sounds insane, but think about the alternative. It means I've been stalking you based on a delusion. Is that more believable than a cover-up? Than a mistake someone wants buried? Sarah pulled out a DNA testing kit. I can't prove it without testing. Will you look at what I've found? James thought about Lily, innocent and unaware. He thought about Rachel. He thought about the coffee mug, the perfume, the woman who'd known things she shouldn't. Sarah was either telling the truth or dangerously delusional. Either way, James needed to know which. Show me everything, he said. His phone rang. Tom. Finally. Don't hang up, Tom said immediately. Sarah is not stable. Her son didn't disappear. Her son died, James. Sudden infant death syndrome when he was 6 months old. She couldn't accept it. She's been stalking families with children the right age for 3 years. You're not the first. Whatever Sarah has told you, it's not real. James sat down. She has hospital records, birth certificates, photographs of Noah at age 4. Tom's voice was careful. She created those documents. She's a data analyst. She knows how to fabricate digital records. The police have investigated. They've verified that her son died as an infant. Noah Winters died at 6 months old. Whatever Sarah has shown you is elaborate fiction. James thought about the records room. The documents spread across the table. How do you explain Rachel's novel? The one about the woman who steals a baby? Tom was quiet for a long moment. What novel? James explained, Tom's sharp intake of breath. I need you to send me that file. If Rachel was writing about child abduction, we need to understand why. James sent the file, waited. When Tom spoke again, his voice had changed. This is more complicated than I thought. But writers explore dark themes. It doesn't mean they're confessing through fiction. But it could mean that, James thought. Sarah says you worked at the hospital 7 years ago, that you saw the clerical error, that you helped Rachel access records. Tom's silence was answer enough. I did work there. I did help Rachel because she was struggling, but the clerical error was caught and fixed within hours. The babies were never actually switched. Rachel's anxiety was understandable but ultimately unfounded. When I realized she was becoming obsessive, I stopped helping. I thought she was getting better. He paused. The drowning was ruled accidental, but James, I've always wondered. If Rachel was dealing with intrusive thoughts, she might have made a choice that looked like an accident. I should have told you years ago. James ended the call without responding. 2 contradictory versions of reality. In one version, Sarah was telling the truth. In the other, Sarah was delusional. Both explained the facts, and James had no idea which was real. His phone buzzed. Sarah, I found something else, something I didn't show you. Meet me at Rachel's grave, sunset. Come alone. James stared at the message. Going alone to a cemetery at sunset seemed like exactly the kind of decision that got people killed. But not going meant living with uncertainty forever. He texted back, I'll be there. Then he drove to the police station and filed a report about Sarah's trespassing, establishing a paper trail. If something happened to him, at least someone would know where to start investigating. Rachel's grave sat in Greenwood Cemetery, a simple headstone under an oak tree. James pulled into the cemetery as the sun touched the horizon. Sarah's car was already there. She stood beside Rachel's grave, looking smaller than before, diminished by grief or guilt or madness. James approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, one hand wrapped around his phone with 911 already dialed. I lied to you, Sarah said without turning around. Not about the babies being switched, but about why I really wanted to meet you, to get close to you, because you're the only person who might understand what Rachel discovered, the only person who might believe me. She knelt beside the grave, her fingers tracing Rachel's name. I've been coming here for 3 years, talking to her, apologizing for not saving her, because I think Rachel knew the truth and it killed her, and I wasn't there to help. She pulled an envelope from her jacket and handed it to James. Inside was a death certificate for Noah Winters, dated 7 years ago when the baby was 6 months old. Cause of death: sudden infant death syndrome. This is real, Sarah said quietly. My son did die at 6 months. It destroyed me. For months, I was catatonic. And then one day, I was going through his things, and I realized something. The baby in those photographs wasn't my baby. The coloring was wrong. The birthmark was wrong. She pulled out another envelope thick with photographs. Infant Noah in the hospital. At 2 months, at 4 months, then suddenly at 5 months, a different baby. Someone switched him, Sarah said, after I brought my real son home from the hospital. Someone broke into our house and switched the babies while I was sleeping. I know how it sounds. But look at the photographs. James studied the images, but infant faces all looked similar to him. Even if someone did switch babies, why? What would be the motivation? Sarah's laugh was broken. To fix the original mistake, to return the babies to their biological families without anyone knowing. The hospital mixed up our babies. Someone discovered it, probably Rachel. And instead of admitting the error publicly, Someone decided to quietly switch them back. Except my switched baby, your biological son, died from SIDS. The conspiracy spiraled deeper, growing more elaborate and therefore more unlikely. If they switch the babies back, then Lily is my biological daughter. The DNA test will show she has no connection to Noah. Sarah shook her head. The DNA test will show she has chromosomal markers consistent with Noah, because they're both my biological children. I didn't give birth to one son. I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The hospital separated them and gave one to each family. When Rachel realized the mistake, someone decided to fix it by switching them back, but they only switched the boy. They left Lily with you because Rachel was threatening legal action. And then, when I got too close to the truth, they made my son disappear. James stood up too fast. Twins. You think we both had twins that were separated? Sarah stood with him. Look at the birth records. Baby girl Hartley. Baby boy Winters. What if there was also baby girl Winters and baby boy Hartley? What if the records were altered to hide 4 births? What if this was deliberate from the start? Now they'd crossed into paranoid fantasy, but James couldn't stop his mind from following the logic. I don't believe you, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah moved closer. You don't have to believe me. You just have to wait 48 hours for the DNA results. If I'm wrong, the test will show that Lily has no genetic connection to Noah. But if I'm right, we have proof. She handed James a second swab. Take your own sample. We'll test your DNA against Lily's. Either way, we'll know something. James took the swab and ran it against his inner cheek, sealing the sample. He had no idea if he was doing the right thing. All he knew was that uncertainty had become unbearable, that living with questions was worse than terrible answers. 48 hours, Sarah said again. Then we'll know the truth. The next 48 hours stretched like elastic. James went through the motions of normal life, while his mind fractured into competing realities. On the second night, New Year's Eve, James tucked Lily into bed and listened to her prayers. At 11:47 p.m., his phone buzzed. The DNA results had arrived. James opened the file and read them 3 times. Lily's DNA showed no genetic connection to Noah Winters beyond baseline similarity, but the paternity test, comparing James's DNA to Lily's, showed something unexpected. James was not Lily's biological father. Probability of paternity, 0.03%. James read the results again. But genetics didn't lie. Lily was not his biological daughter, which meant either Rachel had cheated or babies really had been switched. He texted Sarah. Results came. We need to talk. Same cemetery. 8 a.m. Then he opened Rachel's novel again and read from the beginning. The protagonist, Miranda, hadn't stolen a baby because the universe made a mistake. She'd been given a baby by someone who owed her a debt, someone who worked at a hospital. The novel described Miranda bonding with her daughter, knowing that love couldn't erase the original sin, but hoping it could transform it. Miranda's husband never suspected because he trusted completely. The novel ended with Miranda standing at the edge of a lake. Rachel had stopped writing mid-sentence. She stepped into the water, feeling its cold embrace, and thought about all the ways love could. Could what? Could redeem? Could destroy? James would never know because Rachel had made her choice 3 years ago. He walked upstairs to Lily's room, watching her sleep. She was still his daughter. Biology didn't change 7 years of love, but doubt had been planted. At 7 a.m., James drove to Greenwood Cemetery as dawn painted the sky. Sarah was already there. She looked like she hadn't slept. When she saw James, she straightened. You got the results? James nodded. Lily isn't my biological daughter, But she's also not your biological son. She's not Noah. Whatever connection you thought existed, the DNA doesn't support it. Sarah's face crumpled. That's not possible. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. Show me the results. James handed over his phone. Sarah scrolled through pages. Her expression shifted. James, she said slowly, these results don't say what you think. Lily shares 50% genetic markers with you. She is your biological daughter. But she's also showing a different paternal line in her mitochondrial DNA. That's only possible if she's a chimera. A chimera? Like mythology? Sarah shook her head. A genetic chimera. When two embryos fuse in the womb, creating one person with two different sets of DNA. It's rare, but it happens. Usually in twin pregnancies, where one twin absorbs the other. The result is a person who carries two distinct genetic profiles in different parts of their body. If we tested Lily's blood versus her cheek cells, we might get different paternity results. She scrolled further. The sample we took from Lily's cheek shows you're not the father. But that doesn't mean you're not the father of her blood cells or organs. It means she's carrying multiple genetic profiles, which means my theory about twins was right. But they didn't separate them. The twins fused in utero. Lily is both my daughter and your daughter. She's both herself and Noah. She's carrying her missing brother inside her own body. James sat down hard on the frozen ground. Sarah explained in excited sentences. Chimerism occurred in approximately 10% of twin pregnancies. Most people never knew they were chimeras. Rachel must have been pregnant with fraternal twins, Sarah said. A boy and a girl. But the twins fused early in development. Rachel gave birth to what appeared to be a single baby girl. But that baby girl was carrying her brother's DNA in some of her tissues. James thought about Rachel standing at the edge of that lake, weighing truth against peace. He thought about Lily asleep in her room, carrying mysteries inside her own cells. What do we do now? He asked. Sarah stood up. We tell Lily the truth. We explain that she's special, that she's carrying her brother inside her, that she's two people in one body. And we accept that some questions don't have answers. She extended her hand to help James stand. I'm sorry for stalking you, for frightening Lily, for acting like the villain. I was desperate for answers, and I convinced myself that violating your privacy was justified. It wasn't. I've been wrong about almost everything, but I don't regret meeting you. James took her hand. They stood together beside Rachel's grave while the sun climbed higher. Tom was right, James said. Some truths aren't worth uncovering. Rachel knew that. She chose to die rather than tell me. Maybe she was trying to protect me. Maybe she couldn't live with knowing and never telling. Sarah nodded. Maybe truth isn't the goal. Maybe peace is the goal. Maybe we owe it to Rachel and Lily to accept mystery, to live with uncertainty. She pulled out an envelope. The second DNA test, the one comparing Lily to Noah. I never sent it. Results came back months ago. I've been carrying them around. I want you to decide. Open it or destroy it. James looked at the envelope for a long moment, thinking about Rachel's novel and Sarah's theories and Lily's simple wisdom. He thought about the past year of peace. Then he picked up the envelope and held it over a candle, watching flame consume the paper. He held it until the heat burned his fingers, then dropped it into his water glass, where it hissed and died. Some truths don't need to be known, James said. Some answers would only create new questions. Rachel understood that. She wrote a novel about it, and then stopped mid-sentence because there's no resolution to some stories. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears, but she nodded. Thank you. For making the choice I couldn't make. For letting me stop searching. 1 year later, Christmas Eve again, James sat in the same restaurant where he'd met Sarah. But this time, Lily was with him, dressed in red velvet and chattering about the school play. And Sarah was with them, too, sitting across the table with a glass of red wine and a genuine smile. They'd become something like friends, meeting monthly, always with boundaries, always with the unspoken agreement that they wouldn't dig deeper. Tom was there, too, having finally explained his role, to apologize for his lies. The restaurant still hummed with holiday cheer, but now James felt like he belonged. They raised their glasses in a toast. To family, Sarah said. To truth, Tom added. To questions we don't have to answer, James said. To Christmas, Lily shouted, making them all laugh. After dinner, when Lily went to pick out a dessert, Sarah pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on the table. Same type, same thickness as the one she'd left at Rachel's grave. The DNA test, Sarah said quietly. The one comparing Lily to Noah. I never actually destroyed it. I sent it to the lab. Results came back months ago. I've been carrying them around. I can't carry it anymore. The weight of unknown truth is crushing me. She pushed the envelope toward James. Open it, or destroy it. I'll accept either choice. James looked at the envelope for a long moment. He thought about Rachel's novel, and Sarah's theories, and Lily's wisdom about hide and seek. He thought about the past year of peace. Then he picked up the envelope and held it over the candle in the center of the table, watching flame lick the paper. He held it until the heat burned his fingers, then dropped it into his water glass, where it hissed and died. Some truths don't need to be known, James said. Some answers would only create new questions. Rachel understood that. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears, but she nodded. Thank you. For making the choice I couldn't make. For letting me stop searching. Tom reached across and squeezed her hand. Sometimes, not knowing is the kindest option. Sometimes, mystery is more merciful than truth. Lily returned with chocolate cake and launched into an explanation of why chocolate was superior to vanilla. James watched his daughter talk, her face alight with the joy of being 7 years old. He still didn't know if she was entirely his biological daughter or a genetic fusion. He still didn't know if Sarah's son had died or disappeared. He still didn't know if Rachel had been murdered or had killed herself. And he was learning to live with all that uncertainty, to build a life on faith rather than fact. When dinner ended, they walked out into snow. Sarah gave Lily a hug goodbye, brief and appropriate, no longer desperate. She shook James's hand and whispered, "Thank you," one more time. Then she walked to her car and drove away. James drove Lily home through streets transformed by snow. At home, Lily changed into pajamas and climbed into bed. James sat on the edge of her bed. "Daddy," Lily said sleepily, "why was that lady so sad at the restaurant?" James considered how to answer. "She was sad," he said finally. "But I think she's starting to feel better. I think she's learning that some people we lose are still with us, even if we can't see them. Just like Mommy." Lily nodded. "I'm glad she has us to help her feel better." Everyone needs someone to help them not be so sad. The wisdom of children, James thought. Everyone needs someone. Connection matters more than biology. "You're right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right." He kissed her forehead and stood to leave, but Lily grabbed his hand. "Daddy, do you think Mommy would be happy that we're helping sad people?" James felt his throat tighten. "I think Mommy would be very proud of you. I think she'd say you have a kind heart, and that's the most important thing." Lily smiled and closed her eyes. James turned off the light and stood in the doorway watching his daughter breathe. She was his daughter. Biology didn't matter. Whatever mysteries lived in her cells, she was his, and he was hers. And that truth was the only one that mattered. He walked downstairs where Rachel's laptop still sat. He opened it one last time and read the final incomplete sentence. She stepped into the water, feeling its cold embrace, and thought about all the ways love could. He placed his fingers on the keyboard and typed the words he thought Rachel might have written. Transform betrayal into grace, guilt into acceptance, and truth into something flexible enough to hold multiple contradictory realities without breaking. Then he saved the file, closed the laptop, and put it away. Some stories didn't need endings. Some novels were better left incomplete. His phone buzzed. Sarah, thank you for dinner. Thank you for everything. I'm going to try to move forward now. Stop looking back. Lily is beautiful and kind, and so lucky to have you. Rachel chose well, regardless of whose DNA she carries. Take care of each other. James typed back. Thank you too, for forcing me to look at things I'd been avoiding, for reminding me that truth is complicated and family is what you build. Good luck finding peace. He walked to the window, looking out at snow falling steady. Somewhere out there, Sarah was driving home, trying to let go. Somewhere, Tom was carrying guilt about lies. Somewhere, Rachel was cold and silent, her secret safe forever. And here, Lily slept peacefully, innocent of the mysteries she carried. James stood at that window for a long time, thinking about truth and lies and all the gradients between them. He thought about the envelope burning. He thought about Rachel's last moments in that lake. He thought about Sarah searching for 3 years. And he thought about Lily, sleeping upstairs, carrying her mysteries lightly because she didn't know they existed. Tomorrow he would wake up and make breakfast and go through motions of normal life. He would live with uncertainty because the alternative was madness. He would choose faith over fact because fact was too complicated. And he would raise Lily with love, teaching her that family was about choice and commitment. James turned away from the window and climbed the stairs to his bedroom, passing Lily's closed door, hearing her soft breathing, and feeling gratitude for this simple peace that might be built on lies, but felt true enough to matter. Truth, he'd learned, was overrated. Mystery was kinder. And family was what you made it, even if genetics disagreed. Tomorrow was Christmas, and they would wake up and open presents, and they would be happy because happiness was a choice, like burning envelopes, like letting novels remain unfinished, like accepting that some questions would never be answered. He lay in bed, listening to his house settle, and thought about the title of a story no one would ever write. Single dad showed up late to a Christmas Eve blind date, but the CEO waited with a secret. The secret being that truth was flexible, that identity was multiple, that families were fusions of genetics and choice and love, and lies all tangled together. The secret being that everyone carried mysteries, hidden histories, DNA that contradicted lived experience. The secret being that certainty was an illusion. The secret being that sometimes love was enough, even when nothing else made sense. James closed his eyes and drifted toward sleep. Letting go of questions, releasing them into the winter night where they dissolved like snow. Tomorrow would bring new uncertainties. But tonight, for these few hours, he was just a father whose daughter was asleep upstairs, safe and loved. Tonight, that was truth enough. That was all the certainty he needed. That was the only answer that mattered in a world built from questions and doubts and the desperate human need to believe that something, somewhere, was absolutely true, even when everything else was lies. Merry Christmas, Rachel, wherever you are. Thank you for Lily, whoever she really is. And forgive me for choosing not to know, because not knowing is the only gift I have left to give.